My name is Brian Ortega, and my presentation here is on decriminalization of prostitution, which is the legalizing of prostitution. I'd like to start by saying that we do live in a society where everything is labeled, everything is categorized, and it's kind of affected us throughout the years of our lives and has ingrained our ideas in this kind of moral way in which we see things the way we see things, and we don't see the other sides. So with that said, I'd like to bring this to prostitution, where it is frowned upon. It's frowned upon socially, it's frowned upon financially, it's definitely frowned upon morally, and this is kind of blinding us in the direction that there is other sides to this argument, which is, legalizing prostitution could be very beneficial when there is regulation, and then the opposing side, of course, is that it is wrong and we should stop this prostitution because it's gaining in crime. So we have our four arguments. Our first supporting is that legalizing prostitution could help in the advancement of poor protection that we currently have. With that, our opposing side is that we should stop prostitution altogether. It is causing and leading to other causes like trafficking, like rape and such. Our second supporting argument is that it would make it a victimless crime if it was legalized. It would be a consent of two people with mutual agreement. And then the opposing side is saying there is no consent, there is a comply, that you have to follow the rules that you're associated with. Our third supporting side is that being more comfortable, legalizing prostitution could make you feel comfortable in a situation of making more money and being a little more independent, while another job might pay less. The opposing side to this is that the job was not a choice. It could definitely have been something that was forced upon, or it could have been an economic reason. Our fourth supporting argument is if allowed, the rape rate would actually decrease. We've seen that there are studies that it will go on. And then in the opposing side, we see that the connection is that women are now seen as objects that can be stolen, they can be bought, they can be traded, and that is definitely something that's going to rise crime. Some fallacies that are used in the supporting side is actually the generalization from exceptional cases, a generalization that one of the cases that assumes that all of protection of police is something that is useful and because of one action that happened. We have an appeal to emotion where we're using morality to say that it is antique and we need to change our views of how we perceive things. There's also untestable explanation where we have theoretical evidence that shows a decrease in rape rate. It's not real, it's not something that is actually been practiced. Our fallacies by the opposing argument is a line drawing fallacy that says there is no in between. There's either you gotta stop prostitution or you have to consent to it and deal with the crimes that arise with it. There's the appeal to emotion, the guilt tripping, that shows making us feel guilty that by legalizing prostitution, it could definitely lead to higher crime rates. There's also a fallacy of weak analogy, which compares prostitution to freedom, prostitution and freedom to cattle and freedom, which we will see in the upcoming slides. We also have the fallacy of a slippery slope, arguing that legalizing will eventually lead to rape rates to go up. With that being said, I'd like to start off with our first counter argument, our first opposing side, is that we need to abolish prostitution altogether. It's going to lead to trafficking, it's going to lead to other crimes. Believing that the best way to stop these crimes is by stopping prostitution. We actually have an article, and in this article it was stated that worldwide 79% of identified victims of human trafficking were subject to sexual exploitation. We see that correlation that trafficking is going to lead to prostitution and such. We also have another quote here that says more than half of women in prostitution in UK have been raped and or seriously assaulted. At least 75% have been physically assaulted in the hands of pimps and johns. So their bosses, their contractors are also saying that that could happen. Our counter argument to that is legalizing prostitution would actually help alleviate those problems. It could actually help in protection instead of doing the vice versa. We believe that trafficking in women and exploitation can only be regulated in the best way stopped, and if the existence of prostitution was actually accepted and recognized. The legal and social rights of prostitutions are guaranteed. Dr. the Nkoso Iwana, an advocacy officer, he said that the key benefit of decriminalization is the vast improvement in relationship between police and sex workers. So instead of police trying to arrest prostitutes, they could probably they can instead protect prostitutes. And we actually see this in Rhode Island, where decriminalized indoor prostitution between 2003 and 2009. Between this time, the report was saying that 31%, or 824 fewer reported rapes, and there was a decrease of approximately 2,000 diseases of gonorrhea. So we see that there could be regulation, and it could be possible for police to actually help in that regulation. Our second counter argument is that it is more of a comply than a consent. I mean, we can definitely see that prostitutes are being paid to do certain things, and that could not be really something that can be a consent. It's more of a comply because you are being paid, you have to do it. There's actually a quote that said prostitution creates a setting whereby crimes against men, women, and children become a commercial enterprise. It is an assault when he or she forces a prostitute to engage in sadomasochistic sex scenes. So, the fact that someone is paying you does not make it right. I mean, the fact that they are paying you, I mean, it still means that, the child sexual abuse, rape, and or battery still could occur. Our counter argument to that is it would make it a victimless crime in the sense that there is going to be regulation and there's going to be two consenting adults consenting to that. We actually see that Sue Bradford, she's actually a member of the New Zealand Parliament. She is really into this, and she believed and still do that it was completely wrong to go on living with an archaic law with criminalized generations of sex workers, mainly women, for a victimless so-called crime in the name of antique morality shared by only some of the population. So she's actually a member of New Zealand, and in New Zealand, prostitution is legal. And I did some research and I looked at the policy, and here are some aspects of that such policy. We actually have the exercise of independent contracts where women and of course men that are in prostitution actually have legal documentation of their rights and what they are agreeing to. There is also management that is regulated through bonds and fines. So we see that management cannot exploit their workers, just how in any profession, bosses and contractors cannot exploit their workers. We also have that our workers are made aware of all the rights that they have, so they know how to exercise their rights if need be. Our third counter argument, our opposing side, is that the job was not a choice. It was a necessity, it was an economic decision, it was something that made them go into that with maybe forcefully. So we actually have the International Labor Organization that reports that most women choose for economic reasons. So we see that that's happening. We actually have a stat here that in the United States, the average age of entry into prostitution is about 15 years old. The first responders from across the country also report that the average age of victims with whom they come into contact is 15 years old. As you know, here in the U.S., to be a legal adult, you have to be of 18 years old, and even higher at 21, right, to be of legal consumption. So, to say that they have a choice is merely wrong. We can't really say they have a choice when that's the only option that they are told they have. And some might be forced into such practices. Our counter argument to that is that being more comfortable making something out of themselves, they're doing another job that might pay less. This is a choice. And with regulation, there could actually be an age that people can and do, and then that is going to help with the age, of course. So we have actually Veronica Monet. She's actually stating that you have to stop turning some of them into criminals merely because they have chosen to exchange sex for money. They are actually trying to start up entrepreneurships, and they're in control of how to handle their businesses. We actually see that in New Zealand, again, where that policy says that women are free to exchange in any way, and the only thing the government asks is for taxes. We also see that workers are provided rights and safety measures, like mentioned before, where you can exercise them in the best way you can and when need be. Our fourth contrary point is the connection is that women are now objects that can be used and bought and stolen. And of course, that is a worry that we see. And instead of decriminalizing prostitution, those that take part in these acts should be criminalized. We should focus on stopping the creation of pimps, of traffickers that see women as products. Melissa Farley, she actually said, she wrote, legal sex businesses provide locations where sexual harassment, sexual exploitation, and violence against women are perpetrated with impunity. She goes on, but what she's trying to say is that we are setting up locations where crimes of these sorts can happen, and legalizing prostitution is where that can occur. So we're definitely setting women to be part of this, where they can be bought, they can be sold and traded like any other commodity in the market. Our counter argument to that, of course, is that we've allowed the rape rate will decrease. We've actually had analysis. We've actually had one from Kirby R. Cundiff. He explains that if prostitution were legalized, 25%, there would be a 25% decrease. That would be about 25,000 rapes per year. And that's definitely a decrease in rapes and the decrease in cries. And that's when you legalize prostitutions like the locations that I mentioned before. Linda M. Reichman also said that she did a study, and she conducted it in Queensland, Australia. And in Queensland, Australia, when it was illegalized, the rape rate actually increased 149%, while other offenses against persons by males were increased only 49%. So we see that if illegalized, we see an increase, and if legalized, we see a decrease. Sorry about that. In conclusion, we believe that there are only two options, right? I mean, we see that we have to stop prostitution, or we have to accept it and hope and get all these crimes to occur that come with it. What I see is that we can regulate this, and we can see a middle ground instead of trying to do other options that just don't seem to be getting the results that we want. And because of this, I see that there's definitely ways in which we can make prostitution a lot safer for women, when right now there seems to be no regulation in any way, and there seems to be no protection for people who practice this. And that's the conclusion of my of my presentation. I do like to open up to questions. Thank you very much.